Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are Group 6 in Cross-Linguistic Influence and Learner Language. The member is me, Annisa, as presenter, Muhammad Hairu Rahman as presenter, Ilham Rachmatullah as presenter, and Dadan Saipullah as presenter too. So, let's begin the presentation.
History and theory materials. History. In the middle of the 20th century, one of the most popular pursuits for applied linguistics was the study of the two languages in contrast. Eventually, the stockpile of comparative and quantitative data on a multitude of pairs of language yielded what commonly came to be known as the quantitative analysis hypothesis (CAH). Deeply rooted in the behavioristic and structuralist approach of the day. The CA11 claimed that the principle behind the second language acquisitions is the interference of the first language system with the second language system, and that a scientific, structural analysis of the two languages in question would yield a taxonomy of linguistic contrast between them, which in turn would enable the language teacher to predict the difficulties a learner would encounter. Theory material, markdowns, and universal grammar. Different languages set their parameters differently, terribly creating the characteristic grammar for that language. The hope is that by discovering innate linguistic principles that govern what is possible in human language, we may be better able to understand and describe contrasts between native and target language and the difficulties encountered by adult second language learners. Research on UG has begun to identify such universal properties and principles and therefore represents an avenue of some promise. And now, learner language. The most obvious approach to analyzing interlanguage is to study the speech and writing of learners, or what is sometimes called learner language. Comprehension of a second language is more difficult to study since it is not directly observable and must be inferred from overt verbal and nonverbal response by artificial instrument or by the institution of the teacher or researcher. Error analysis. Ascorder 1067 notes all linear errors are significant in that they provide to the researcher evidence of how language is learned or acquired, what strategy or procedure the learner is employing in the discovery of the language. Mistakes and errors. A mistake refers to a performance error that is either a random guess or outlive in that L is a failure to utilize a known system correctly. An error, a noticeable definition from the adult grammar of a native speaker, reflects the complexities of the learning.
Errors in error analysis. In the analysis of learners' errors, to engage in performance analysis or interlanguage analysis from Salce Murcia and Hawkins, 1985. A less restrictive concept that places a healthy investigation of errors within the larger perspective of the learner's total language performance. While a significant portion of this chapter deals with error analysis, let us nevertheless remember that production errors are only a subset of the overall performance of the learner. Identifying and describing errors. The first step in the process of analysis is the identification and descriptions of errors. Corder 1971 provided a model for identifying erroneous or idiosyncratic utterances in a second language. According to Corder's model, any sentence uttered by the learner and subsequently transcriber can be analyzed for idiosyncrasies. A major distinction is made at the outset between overt and covert errors. Sources of error. Sources of error, having examined procedures of error analysis used to identify errors in second language learner production data. Our final step in the analysis of erroneous learner speech is that of determining the source of error. Interlingual transfer. Researchers Odlin 2003, Jasol 1995, Tyler 1975 have found that the early stage of language learning are characterized by a predominance of interference or interlingual transfer. But once learners have begun to acquire parts of the new system, more and more intralingual transfer generalization within the target language is manifested. Context of learning, a third major source of error, although it overlaps both types of transfer, is the context of learning. Context refers to example, to the classroom with its teacher and its material in the case of school learning, or the social situation in the case of the third second language learning.
Communication strategies were defined and related to learning styles. Learning obviously used production strategies in order to enhance getting their message from across, but at times these techniques can themselves become a source of error on an ESL. Learners said, "Let us work for the well done of our country." Well, it exhibited a nice little twist of humor. The sentence had an incorrect approximation of the word welfare. Stage of learner language development. 1. A stage of random error. 2. Stage of learner language finds the learner growing inconsistently in linguistic production. Variation in learning language. One of the most fruitful areas of learning language research has focused on the variation that arises from the disparity between classroom context and natural situation outside language classes. Fossilization or stabilization. Fossilization can be seen as consistent with principles of human learning already discussed in this book. Conditioning requirements need motivation, self-determination, and order.
Theory material. Errors in the classroom. Historically, error treatment in language classroom has been a hot topic. In the days of the audiolingual method, errors were viewed a phenomena to be avoided by overlearning, memorizing, and getting it right from the start. Then, some method, community language learning, the natural approach to analysis fires approach to error, under the assumption that natural process within the learner will eventually lead to acquisition (CLT) approach, including text-based instruction. Now, tend to advocate an optimal balance between attention to form and errors and attention to meaning. From focused instruction, a number of varying definitions have emerged. Williams, Jessica 203, Doughty 2003, Ellis 2001, Doughty and Williams 1998, Spada 1997. But for the sake of simplifying a complex pedagogical issue, let us rely on Spada's nicely worded definition. Any pedagogical effort which is used to draw the learner's attention to language from either implicitly or explicitly. Thank you. Theory material. Categories of error treatment. These terms represent concepts and operational definitions that are the product of a multitude of research on error treatment and FFI. The following descriptions are drawn from Jessica Williams 2005, Ellis 2001, Lister 2004, and Panova and Lister 2002. The terms are divided into what Panova and Lister call feedback types and learners respond to feedback. Examples are provided to show learner L and teacher T occurrence. Conclusion. So cross-linguistic is typically defined as the influence knowledge of foreign individual learning or else of another language. This influence can involve various aspects of language,